Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I am Ethan, joined as always by Pete. Hey, Pete. Good morning. Happy Saturday. How are you?
I am great, buddy. How are you?
Everything is great. It is time for the weekly Films and Stuff stream or skip segment. We know the rules, but can you just refresh them for us one more time?
Absolutely. So Ethan has prepared a list of shows he'd like me to watch. I have done the same for him. Every week, we randomly assign each other one show from each of our lists to watch. We watch at least 2 episodes or 30 minutes if it's a feature-length film. And based on that, we determined if the show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
That's right. That's right. Both of us have been on a little bit of a, let's call it a cool streak lately. Let's not say cold.
Tell me about it.
Cool streak. Maybe it's going to change this week because I was assigned a docu-series on Netflix named Muscles and Mayhem, the unauthorized story of American Gladiators. Do you remember American Gladiators?
I absolutely love it.
Like, it was a big part of our childhood, right?
It absolutely was.
So for the uninitiated, American Gladiators was a syndicated television show. It ran from 1989 to 1996, so they had a good kind of 7+ years. There was also a brief reboot in 2008 that kind of went nowhere. And Netflix has now made a docu-series out of it, which means it's 5 episodes. I have watched 4 of the 5 episodes. I've not watched the finale. And I'm here to say it is definitely worth your time. It is a strong mooch. And the reason is as follows. It doesn't really need to be 5 episodes. It could have probably been a 2-hour documentary. It probably could have been a 3-episode docuseries. I mean, it was definitely a very, very compelling show at the time. It had, a very popular 7-year run, but it wasn't like this cultural phenomenon that changed the world of entertainment or sports as we know it. It definitely is worth a documentary, but I think that it just had a little bit of trouble filling 5 full episodes. There's a lot of interviews, and I have to say the people that they've chosen to interview are pretty good. For those who don't recall the show, there were gladiators who were kind of like the professional athletes on the show, and they were all dressed in red, white, and blue with a lot of sparkly and spandex type material. They were all huge. The men and women were all huge. In their own right, pretty accomplished athletes. And the documentary goes into some of their athletic backgrounds and achievements before they became gladiators. They competed in about 5 or 6 different athletic events, kind of like obstacle course type things against, just kind of like the everyday common man who was the challenger. Some of the better or more well-known gladiators were Gemini, Nitro, Laser. I think all of them were professional American football players who either had a very short career or tryout or were injured and they were looking to do, something else. From the women's side, there was Zap, Ice, Lace, Blaze. Again, very, very fit. Some of them are bodybuilders. Some of them were collegiate athletes, track and field, sprinting, but they were all very well accomplished. I think that was one of the successful formulas of the show, is that the gladiators were relatively well known. They weren't necessarily supposed to be the fan favorites. They were a little bit, playing the heel, if you take the WWE model. But they were very well known. Nitro was well known, Gemini was well known, Ice was very well known. They weren't smiley gladiators. They were definitely serious, rugged gladiators. But it was because of that, I think, stoic demeanor that they had such a strong following among them. Docuseries goes into kind of 3 main elements. The first element was how the show was created, kind of the inspiration and some of the challenges that this type of show had. The second is they go into kind of the backgrounds of each of the different, gladiators, not all of them, but kind of the more popular ones. And this is where a lot of the interviews come from. And then the third was kind of like how successful American Gladiators actually began and how it was really like woven into pop culture. Gladiators appeared in MTV videos. They made like a lot of cameos in shows and movies. Let's start from the beginning, how the show was conceptualized. There was this one random dude who pitched it to the studio. The studio decided it would be a good idea. They didn't have anything. They did tryouts for the Gladiators. They had to create the set. They had to create the stunts. And they said that those first 13 episodes, the first half of the first season, the Gladiators referred to as the Dark Ages. They said like everything was wrong and ratings were super, super low. Their outfits were basically just spandex. There was no padding on them at all. Basically, they were playing all these sports on just like a movie, like a Hollywood set. There's no padding. There's no protective gear. The set itself, one, it was cheap looking, not very impressive. The events hadn't really been well thought through. It wasn't really clear who had a competitive advantage. To change the set from event to event, was like an all-day process. Oh, and they also said that the original contestants were not like the everyday man. They were also kind of like former accomplished athletes. So the Gladiators said, first of all, every match was very, very challenging. But they're like, if we had to do like this all day, like they were getting like really beat up and it was really exhausting for them because they were basically going up against very formidable opponent repeatedly. So the first 13 episodes were not very successful. They rebooted a little bit. They hired some new folks to be the director. They hired some new folks to kind of take over the design of the set and the design of the events. They improved the padding, the protection. They rethought the outfits. The second half of the first season was much more successful. And the look and feel was much more like what you and I recall. So originally, the contestants were just hiding behind like these fake trees. And it looked like really weird. Like even they showed the footage and it just looked terrible. Then they said, let's make it like a little bit more, futuristic. So they had kind of like these gray boxes, with like the white outlines that looked like a little bit more like Running Man or Tron, like the style at the time. And then they stopped recruiting like very, very good athletes to be the contestants. And instead they wanted to do kind of the everyman because they really wanted it to have kind of this Roman David Goliath gladiator, type feel that no one was really interested watching two former professional athletes pull and tug and joust each other. It was more interesting when there was a clear underdog.
Right.
And therefore, when the underdog won, it was like a little bit more exciting and everyone got more enthusiastic over it. So that's kind of the creation of the series. Then the second part is, of course, going into each of the different gladiators, how they were recruited, what they thought of it, what the process was, a little bit of their backstory. And then they go a lot into substance use and abuse. So that particularly focused on steroids. And that's a little bit of a taboo topic because some of the folks were straight up, yeah, I did steroids. And some of them were like, I never did steroids. And then they were pressed a little bit more. And then it was, well, I did growth hormone or I did this, but I never did steroids. The majority of the gladiators were on some type of substance to help them get so big. And they were incredibly big. From the male perspective, the guys were big and muscular and strong, but not something that you and I would be like, whoa, we've never seen anyone that big before. They were proper American football-sized athletes. I mean, it would not be unusual for you and I to see like a person like this if we went to the mall or walked around town, once a day. The women were something else. The women were dramatically, dramatically big. And I would venture to say you could not find women like this in everyday life. They were really, really big. Most of them came from bodybuilding backgrounds. So I think that's kind of the difference between the men and the lady. And there's an interesting point to make that I didn't realize, and it was probably glossed over a little bit. The men and the women in this show were treated very, very equally. The women had the same events as the men. Let's take the event Joust, because I think we probably remember that one, right?
Yep.
They had like these big Q-tips, these big things. They stood on a pedestal and tried to knock each other off. The men and the women had exactly the same equipment. The woman's Joust stick was not smaller. It didn't weigh less. The pedestal was the same height, same distance. It would be like man joust, then female joust, then female this event, then male this event. Remember they had the cannonball event, right? Where someone like jumps on a rope and they swing and they try to knock the gladiator off the pedestal.
That's right.
You remember this one? Everything was the same, men and women. Like even if you look at like the WNBA, a women's basketball is a different size than a men's basketball. In American Gladiators, everything is exactly the same. So the females even said, like, I don't know if they shared like a locker room, but like they shared like a facility, and there was no like the men's facility was so great and the women's facility was less. Like everything was the same. Like we were treated the exact same as the men. We were gladiators. No one said woman gladiator, man gladiator. And they said, like, looking back now, we appreciate how egalitarian that was. At the time, we didn't think about it. Like, it was just like, okay, we're all on the show. But they're like, looking back now with all and this is filmed in 2022. They're like, looking back at all the gender equality issues now, they're like, we never had any of that. Like, no one said you'll be treated differently. The events were just as hard. We got paid just as much. Everything was exactly equal, men and women. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. The backgrounds for all the gladiators are interesting just because like every person has their own background, but none of them were like terribly different than what you'd kind of assume. And then you get into the third part, which is the success of the show. And after it started a little bit slow. It gained huge momentum. It was, referenced in pop culture. It was syndicated worldwide. It became kind of like a mini Baywatch in terms of everybody knew it. It was ubiquitous. Everyone watched it. Everyone loved it. Eventually, it grew too big for its own skin. And to be honest, the events never really changed. And it just kind of like slowly died down. I imagine when I watch the 5th episode, it will explain exactly how that is. But it basically just seemed that everyone kind of got fatigued and they moved on to the next place. But at the time, it was super huge. They were showing like all the different cameos that gladiators made. Like, remember the Ellen DeGeneres show? Like when she had a sitcom. Like there was an American Gladiator episode where Ellen was a contestant on the show and she fell in love with one of the gladiators. It just shows like how pervasive this show was in kind of like mainstream culture. It was really a phenomenon at the time. So I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed watching it because I watched the show as a kid. I feel like it was on like Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, kind of like after, like the animated cartoons would end. I feel like I watched it a bunch of times, like I recognized Nitro. I recognized Ice, like the names, came back to me. So it was a good stroll down memory lane. It was interesting, solid mooch. Definitely, it's not a must subscribe. There's just not enough interesting about that. And honestly, now that you've listened to this podcast, you probably get the sense of everything. Of course, I'm leaving hours of details out, but for the most part, I think that you get it. But it was very satisfying to watch, and I would absolutely give it a strong mooch as a rating.
I think, as with most docuseries and documentaries, it comes down to the individual viewer's interest in the topic being discussed.
Yep.
That's probably why it's a strong mooch for you, and it's probably why I will definitely watch this show. It's because I loved Gladiators growing up. We made the same comment with Michael J. Fox when we saw Still. The level of interest for you, the viewer, will determine the rating. I think it's very rare that you would watch a documentary and hate it if you like the topic.
There's also a lot to be said for the folks that are interviewed. Nitro was a very charismatic interviewee. a little bit dramatic. There's some folks that you feel like, wow, this person's been waiting their whole life to be interviewed. He was a little bit dramatic, but he was very well spoken, didn't avoid questions. Like, he was a very, very good interviewee. They interviewed some of the executive producers. Those people were pretty dull. And maybe you'd think, okay, of course, a gladiator is going to be more charismatic than a producer, but there's no reason why the producers had to be so dull. To be honest, their interviews didn't really add anything. When there was a topic of like health and safety, they just gave these very generic kind of answers like, of course, we were always looking out for the safety of the gladiators and the contestants, and we reviewed, those safety measures, from time to time. Like, that's just not like a documentary type answer, right? Whereas Nitro's like, come on, what did they think? I was not given any knee pads. I was not given a helmet. I was given hot shorts and a tank top. Like, there's no protection even from like carpet burns. We're playing on basically a cement surface that just has like a thin layer of carpet over. What did they think was going to happen? Like, his answer was way more charismatic. For a docuseries, I think it also depends on if you can get the right folks to be open and candid and a little bit spontaneous on camera.
Right.
So anyway, that is Netflix's Muscles and Mayhem. The unauthorized story of American Gladiators just came out. It's definitely a mooch, but if you've watched the American Gladiators series, I think that there's something in it that will definitely trigger your trip down memory lane, and hopefully they're good memories for you.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to watching it.
But enough about me. Let's get to the main event, my friend. Is your cold streak over?
I don't think it's over, but it could be. It's lukewarm.
Oh.
So this
Tell
week,
us.
I watched on Paramount Plus Taylor Sheridan's latest show, Special Ops: Lioness, otherwise colloquially known as Lioness.
Lioness. Can I give a spoiler alert? I watched it also. So I'm going to let you describe it, but then you and I can have a little bit of back and forth on it.
Absolutely. So the show is a military-themed thriller. It's basically about a team of, I don't want to say women only, but it's basically a women first or a female forward group of special operatives who are called Lionesses. Mm-hmm. And the reason that the covert ops focuses on women is because the team plants American soldiers / spies, let's say behind enemy lines, as the girlfriends of some known terrorist or the girlfriend of the wife of a known terrorist and so forth. And the idea of planting these operatives into that group is they'll be able to determine, valuable intel such as locations or targets, that sort of thing.
I think that's a cool idea. I have to say, I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but I think this is a very cool take on something that we haven't seen in a very large library of war on terror type shows.
This military target style show, and more specifically, this show fits in a subgenre of military thrillers on TV, which is the modern day military thriller. I'm talking like the John Krasinski led Jack Ryan. It's a little bit more gritty. It's a little bit more action heavy. It's a little bit more modern. It's less cerebral, but it's more, focused on action elements than it is about covert operative elements. Although this show does focus a lot on being a covert operation. So it's pretty good. I'm actually up to date. Normally I watch 2, maybe 3 episodes. I've actually caught up on all 5 episodes that have been released so far. The show stars Zoe Saldana. This is an element that she's played very, not often, but very well. She did this in The Losers. She did this in Colombiana. She kind of was like this with Gamora in the Avengers movies, where she's like this hardcore fighter. She's really tough. She's no nonsense. She's not like a jokey person. She's very serious. Like she's there to do a job and that's it. Fair enough to her. Even though we've seen her do this a lot, she's very good at it. You don't just believe her in terms of her acting, but like in terms of her physicality, she's unparalleled. It's the same reason that Michelle Rodriguez get cast in similar type roles to what we see her as Letty in Fast and the Furious, because she's very good in that role. So, and that's the same thing.
I agree.
The premise of this series is that in the first episode, Zoe Saldana's operatives, they lose her plant because she gets found out because she's got a tattoo. And obviously she wasn't supposed to have a tattoo. It's a very big no-no in the hardcore Islamic culture that these guys were trying to portray. That's how she gets found out.
It was a tattoo of a Christian cross.
Of a Christian cross, exactly. And then here's how the show establishes that Zoe Saldana's character is a no-nonsense person. Rather than try to save her, she sacrifices her agent, which is the exact opposite from what we would expect to see from like a classical American military, no man left behind style thing. They have an intense firefight. And at the end of the firefight, she's like, I can't risk her being captured and tortured. I'm just going to have a predator drone blow up the entire building, blow up the terrorist cell, and I'll sacrifice my operative. I mean, it came out of left field. I thought we were in for like a 40-minute fight sequence. Not at all. We saw 5 minutes of shooting punctuated with a predator missile strike. And that was the first 10 minutes of the show. That established that she is a cold-blooded operative who is mission first, everybody else second.
I'm just going to chime in. I love that part. I've got a complaint about how the rest of her character is portrayed that I don't think is consistent with that. But I love that part as well. And I thought that was a very, very good device to use.
I also think that they did that on purpose because by the end of this season, she's going to be forced to make that same decision. And this time she's going to go in and try to save the operative.
Probably.
It's a very good way to establish that she's a cold-blooded killer, but it's almost too cold-blooded for TV, even though that's probably the most realistic thing that the American military certainly would do.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that they're setting that up so that when this happens again in the last episode or in the penultimate episode, she'll go in there all guns blazing to get her new operative out.
That's right.
Speaking of which, the rest of the show that so far has been basically the second episode on establishes that she needs a new operative. She gets a new operative in this new or relatively new actor, Leisla de Oliveira. She's a Brazilian actress. Very good. Also a tough, no nonsense, like very physical actor, like very convincing in her physicality. We now go through the A plot, which is she's training this new operative to be a member of her squad. And then she plants this new operative to find out, that, theoretically Al-Qaeda or some other terrorist cell is making a play. We don't know what the play is. We don't know where the guys are going to attack. So we need to plant her. And they go ahead and plant her. And that's where we are in the A plot. And of course, the B plot is Zoe Saldana's got a tough family life. She's in love with her husband, but their family life is very strained because her husband is also a very highly successful surgeon. She's got 2 daughters. The younger daughter is an angel. The older daughter is this same exact trope, which nobody likes anymore, where she's a total pain in the ass. There are other words that I would more accurately like to use to describe her, but that's not family-friendly words. Like, she's a horrible, horrible, horrible daughter. This uber-privileged kid who doesn't know she's uber-privileged and does a lot of nonsense. She's the absolute worst. And it's the same trope, right? That highly successful work life, she's struggling with her work-life balance, struggling with not her marriage so much, but her family life in general. And then I'm almost certain another potential trope is that the terrorists are going to find out about Zoe Saldana's personal life, and they're going to either kidnap the family or make an attack on the family.
You're so good at seeing these things.
They're common tropes,
Yeah.
and bless him for all his faults and for all his successes. Taylor Sheridan goes for tropes because they work. He has this like almost Michael Bay-esque pro-Americana feel. Like, you know how Michael Bay has like this massive hard-on for the American military industrial complex?
Yeah.
I feel like Taylor Sheridan has exactly the same thing, but for the quote-unquote traditional or old-fashioned view of what it means to be an American patriot. And we've seen that time and time again with Kevin Costner in Yellowstone.
Mhm.
We saw that with Sylvester Stallone in Tulsa King.
Oh yeah, Tulsa King.
We're seeing bits and pieces of that with Zoe Saldana's, whole crew in Lioness. So these are the kinds of tropes that he goes on. They're reliable because they work.
I really didn't like her family life. I really like her husband, Neil, by the way.
Yeah.
I thought that he was a very, very good father and husband, but I felt really this disconnect. So we were introduced to Zoe's character, and she's in somewhere in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, she's in kind of like a green zone type base. She's in all camouflage. We consider her like a very tough soldier. Then we see her come back. She's driving a luxury car. This is not really the car that I felt like she would be driving. She's not driving a truck. She's not driving like a Mustang. She's driving a proper four-door family luxury saloon, driving into like a luxury house somewhere in Virginia. Her husband's like, we have to say it, a white surgeon. It seemed like such a disconnect that she had this type of like personal family life when her career is so gritty and she's making like these very, very serious decisions, right? And sacrificing agents. I just felt like there's a real disconnect in terms of how she was living. I would have expected her to like be back in Virginia, and she's living in like this very basic kind of like studio apartment, right?
Or like a farm or a ranch somewhere.
Yeah. Like, like I don't expect her to have a husband who's a surgeon. I don't expect her to have two kids. She seems to be all about the mission, 100% dedicated. I would think that she'd be kind of like this recluse, like people are trying to call her, reach her. Like she has like this friends and family network, but she's like always too busy. She ignores them. And she's just kind of like a recluse, only focused on the mission, living in this very small apartment, doesn't care about anything else but the mission. I would have been more sympathetic to her character. I felt this big disconnect where it's like, so she's in, make up this place, Syria, Iraq, gritty, sacrificing lives. Then she's coming back, gets into her luxury car, drives to her big luxury house, sits by the pool in the backyard with a bottle of wine with her husband, who's a surgeon. Like, it just felt too disconnected for me in terms of, I guess, I felt like she was less dedicated to the mission and more dedicated to just kind of like winning or losing, not really looking at like the consequences or the bigger picture of what winning or losing were.
Let me pose an alternative. What if she were living that recluse-esque lifestyle, right? Or this solitary kind of lifestyle. And she's not married yet, but she's dating this surgeon guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't know that she's this military guy. She's got that cover, you know, that she tells her daughter she's a translator for the UN.
Yes.
And then she doesn't have the family, and then she gets pregnant.
Dude, this is why we so deserve to be writing shows, because this is exactly it. So she's back in the US, right? She's got an injury. She doesn't go to like the VA hospital. She goes to like a private medical center because she's allegedly not in the military, right? And she's got like a shoulder injury, or she's got something. That's where she meets the doctor. He's like asking her out. She's like, no, I'm a recluse. Eventually she relents. They go out. She's introduced to his two daughters. His wife passed away, or they're divorced, or whatever his backstory is, right? She gets pregnant. She like leaves him. She's like, look, this was a fun fling. Gotta go. Finds out she's pregnant. And then she's back in the mix. Better story, right?
I mean, it certainly makes things more exciting for her in terms of the dichotomy of her mission first focus versus now I'm pregnant.
I just have a problem with her personality. When we see her personality, I can't even get myself into a place emotionally to imagine her and her husband like dating, courting. What was that about? Because she's not winning him over. Surgeons have a very clear disposition, and I would expect CIA contractors have a very unique disposition. They're not going to dinner and she's not wowing him with her intelligence job. Her cover is that she's just a translator. She's trying to dumb it down. Where was the attraction? Where was the courtship? What did they have in common? It doesn't seem like anything. Even to like start a family, she's going to continue to have this job when she has not one daughter, but two daughters. Doesn't make sense at all. It's a way more realistic cover, as you mentioned, that they somehow meet and then there's a courtship and she thinks, look, this was a fun little fling. You're a nice guy. I've got a more important job to do. Then the pregnancy surprises them both and then they're back into it. And then you can also understand the resentment of the older daughter who lost her mother, the older daughter who's like, hey, I don't know you. I don't like you. I don't trust you. I don't want you with my dad. That and all that like misbehavior is much more contextual for me.
Yeah, I agree. To their credit, I think Taylor Sheridan did try to address that where Nicole Kidman, who by the way, fantastic. So where we see Nicole Kidman tell her, look, maybe you think about shifting roles and becoming a station chief in London where you basically get a desk job, right? It's not like they're oblivious to the same issues that you and I are potentially seeing. They are suggesting alternatives.
What do you think of Cruz, the new recruit?
I like her. I really like her. So I haven't seen her in anything else. I saw her. So, we forgot to mention this, by the way, but this episode is our 1-year anniversary of Streamer Skip. I totally.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, this is
I forgot our anniversary.
Yeah. This is our 52nd episode of Streamer Skip.
Thank you very much. It's been a very, very, very rewarding year.
It's been a very rewarding 52 episodes, right? So
wow.
The reason I mentioned that is because the last time, and maybe the first time I actually saw Cruz was in one of our earlier Streamer Skip episodes, Lock and Key, which is streaming on Netflix.
Lock and Key.
That's where I know her from. I mean, vaguely. I didn't recognize her off the top of my head. When I saw her IMDb, that's when it clicked. She is, as far as I'm concerned, a relatively young / new actor. In general, I buy it. She is tough as nails, right? And there's very little about her in terms of her physicality that I don't buy. So I like it. I'm a big fan of hers.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't have a problem with her as a character. I think I actually kind of like her character. I have two issues, I think, with the plot. I really didn't like the episode where she was kind of kidnapped by Zoe Saldana's team, and she was tested to see like if she would break under interrogation or like physical stress, right? I didn't like this, not because I don't think that was realistic or an appropriate test. I didn't like it because, to be honest, that seemed like terrible management by Zoe Saldana. She's in the middle of an undercover op. Why are you beating her up? Like all the bruising and the broken nose and the chipped teeth and all this other stuff. I was thinking the entire time, like, what a bad management decision. If this op is so important for you, you should be making her prettier, not beating her up.
This should have happened before, right?
I agree. That should have been a test before. Or she could have had a blown op, and this was like the test to see if she was ready for a second one, right?
Yeah.
But to do it in the middle of the op when you know you're trying to like, I mean, that just seems so stupid. Like that seemed like a fireable offense of Zoe Saldana. Like, why would you ever risk the op? And then this terrible cover story, like, oh, it's a car accident, bloody, bloody, blah. I didn't like it. But anyway, I think that's a little bit forgivable. The second part is and you know I'm Arab, so I'm going to rail on this. I really dislike the way that they portray the Arabs here.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really annoying to me, I have to say.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate. You start off with why you didn't like it.
I don't like it because the way that the Lioness was supposed to infiltrate the system is first they put her in Kuwait City, which is a very, very foreign place. And they say that actually her Arabic is good, but all she does is speak English. She bumps into someone in a jewelry store, and immediately the lady's like, oh, well, let's go shopping together. I'll give you a makeover, or blah, 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 blah. I'm shocked it happened so fast. And then it doesn't even stay in the Middle East, which I probably could have believed a little bit. Then it shifts to the US, and all the Arabs are now living in Houston, in this big mansion in Houston. And then she invites Lisa there, which I guess her name is Cruz, invites Cruz there. They discover she's been in this terrible car accident, but she's okay. Then they get on a private plane in Houston, and they fly to where, Nantucket?
Something like that. Yeah, Long Island, I thought.
To do some partying. And then they're like best friends right away. I just felt like it's so unrealistic that all this happens. It would have been better if this would have been playing out a few times. They would have like met in Dubai together, or this would have been together, or she was like, there just had to be a better hook. I thought that whole story came together way too easily, and there was no Arabic at all. It just shifted entirely to an American or a US based plot.
What I think I agree with for sure is the speed at which things happened. I think that the fact that she becomes kind of ingratiated into that circle of friends within an episode was a bit shocking. I thought what would have been cool is, the security guards at that house on Long Island started speaking to her in Arabic as like a test.
Yeah.
Just to kind of gauge. We're told a lot about her abilities, and except for the physical, we don't actually see her exhibit any of her spy master abilities.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
And I keep talking about it, but remember Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt? I mean, yes. I come to this a lot because I honestly think it's one of the best spy movies and spy thrillers out there. But like, even in their training montage, we are shown in that training montage how he has to learn to be a spy master. I want you to go into that apartment and be out that window in the next 10 minutes. Otherwise you fail this test. You know, these kinds of things, we don't see any of that. We see her kick a lot of ass, which is great. But in terms of the more cerebral stuff, we don't see any of that. So I'm 100% with you. And this is going to be me playing devil's advocate, though. But in terms of the attitude and the behavior of that circle of, quote unquote Arabs, because they're all relatively generic Arabs, right? They're not referred to as any particular nationality because, subtlety of this kind of.
Well, she's Kuwaiti. Her friend is Kuwaiti. And she's going to marry a Saudi. Remember?
Yeah, Saudi, and then they're going to get married in Dubai and whatever. And, she doesn't really want to get married. There was some implication that she might be gay. She might not be. I don't know. I got that feeling. I don't know. But, the point is that it's not very subtle. And I don't mean to denigrate American audiences in any way, shape, or form. But I think your average Taylor Sheridan fan may not be the most well sophisticated and read in terms of the nuances between the different nationalities of the Middle East. So I think that's why they probably didn't bother going into such detail. But having said that, in terms of attitude and in terms of behavior, I actually felt like their portrayal of them partying up in, Long Island or on that beach resort town, that seemed relatively authentic to some of the behavior I have seen with some Arabs in the US.
I would say like their, if I can say, arrogance, and they kept a very tight group, even though they didn't necessarily like each other.
Yeah.
They kept like that very insular group. I agree with you. I thought that was realistic. That also caused me why I was so skeptical that they like brought Cruz into the
Immediately
group.
brought her in. Exactly.
Yeah. Even you and I, who don't have to be like guarded, it's very hard to like find a friend and like immediately like invite them into your house and stay the weekend and do this and see my doctor and travel with us here. Like, okay, like you can do something with them, but like that's a longer period of time, particularly because Cruz didn't play like a very interesting or charismatic person, right? She didn't really offer anything. It wasn't like she was supposedly super, super wealthy and they wanted like that wealth in the group. She wasn't kind of like a entertainer or a famous person and they wanted that into their group. Like she didn't really bring anything. She didn't really bring money. She didn't bring charisma. She wasn't from a named family or anything. Like there was no real reason why they would have been like so keen. She wasn't even like that nice or interesting or funny. She had just basically was in a car accident, which makes her probably less likely that you'd want to hang out with someone who's obviously recovering from like facial injuries.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the overall dynamic of the show. We've, as always, which we love to do, we've digressed a bit, we've tangented a bit. How do you like this show overall? Like, how do you feel about the show when you watch it?
So when I first saw it, my immediate reaction was to compare it to Jack Ryan, the new Jack Ryan series. It's got a lot of the same vibes. It's got a very modern / dark / gritty take on American, Middle Eastern, or American / enemy combatant relationships. You know, in fact, it's even got some of the same actors, with Michael Kelly's in there as well. So at first I thought it was quite generic. Not a bad thing, by the way. I thought it was fine. However, I gotta say, and it's in my notes, it was strangely compelling. And I think that comes straight down to the fact that I really like Cruz. I really like Zoe Saldana. There's something about them, even though their characters may be a little bit more one-dimensional than I'd like them to be, I still like them. So there's something compelling about it. At the moment, this show is a strong mooch for me, or at least a mooch for me. But I'm going to stick with it. And in fact, it's actually a show I recommended to my dad because he also likes these, pseudo-military-esque, espionage-esque thrillers. So even though I don't recommend it openly to everyone, I think this is the kind of show where if you like Jack Ryan, if you like these, Tom Clancy-esque thrillers or military action dramas, I think you're going to love this. I'm sticking with it as a mooch. And depending on how this season ends, it could theoretically become a must subscribe because I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to lay some fantastic ending on there.
I agree with everything that you've said. But from my perspective, I have this real sincere quandary about it. And it's very much like eating like a fast food double cheeseburger.
Right. Yeah.
You're really enjoying it at the time. And as soon as you're done, you have a little bit of guilt. And I feel that about this show. I have to say, I will watch the next episode when it comes out. And when I'm done, I'm probably going to have the same little bit of self-loathing about it because it's absolutely good quality entertainment. I really feel like I love spy stuff. Yeah. I love Middle East political intrigue, but I feel very similar to when I watched Homeland, which I had to stop watching because I just felt so unhappy when I'd finish each episode. I'm yearning for a show that can talk about the subject matter, which is a little bit more nuanced and not just good versus bad. And not just maybe what I don't like about Zoe Saldana's character, even though I love the way she plays that character, her performance, exceptional. Her character is repugnant though. And sometimes repugnant characters are important to watch a show, but like she's not a good mother. She's not really a good wife. She may be good at her job, but I feel like I'm missing this nuance in terms of why there's no one in this show who's kind of like questioning, does the end justify the means? And Zoe Saldana's character seems to say, hey, whatever we do, it's okay. I can order a group to go down to Texas and have a shootout with other law enforcement people. That's okay because this is for the greater good of anti-terrorism. I can do this because that's for the greater good. I can neglect my children. I can neglect my husband. I can do this and that, all because this is for the greater good. If she's going to do that, I want her to be this very solitary, reclusive person who's got like these either staunch political beliefs or backstory that justifies this. But I'm really yearning for someone who's a little bit more nuanced and saying, hey, it's not so clear what's good and bad. It's not so clear what's right or wrong. Let's try to manipulate this a little bit from the inside and take decisions that are a little bit better all the way around and more well-rounded and not just win at all cost. That's a little bit of my frustration with this show, is that I feel like Saldana's character doesn't have this nuance. This show doesn't have this nuance. And it's just portrayed kind of as like, anything we do, it's justified. Even kind of like undermining our own democracy is justified because that's what it takes, to fight this war on terror. And that's a take for sure. And I'm not in a position in life to say whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying watching that real time in a television show doesn't really make me feel good.
Yeah.
The stunt that they pulled in Texas, I mean, if you think about it, there was a legitimate criminal arrested for doing something legitimately wrong, legitimate law enforcement personnel who have families, who have a job, who are doing everything according to their job, are basically assaulted because this prisoner is more important to the war on terror than it is to, whatever legitimate law enforcement process, was in place. And I know that these are things that are meant to, be dramatic for purposes of the show, but it really puts a bad taste in my mouth. And whether that makes me too emotional or otherwise, it's one of the reasons I can't say this is a must subscribe, because there's too many of those events in this show for my comfort. But I freely admit it's a very compelling show. Yeah. It would be hard for me not to watch the next episode, but I will have a pang of guilt about doing so.
No, I get that. And what you're saying makes total sense. I think you're absolutely right. I probably haven't done too much of a deep dive into it yet, but I agree with you, and your analogy is absolutely correct. It is like eating a McDonald's quarter pounder.
Yeah.
It's great while you're eating it, you're enjoying it, but the moment you finish that last drop of soda and that last French fry, within 10 minutes, you're just like, oh, I should not have done that.
I'm actually okay if it's going to be this balls to the wall show about the war on terror and covert operations. Keep the kids out of it. I really feel like when her kid got in the car accident, and then there's all these like teen issues, right?
Yeah, the B plot's terrible. I'm not a fan.
That should be kept out. I mean, you can make that show about Neil. Say, hey, I'm a surgeon. I'm called in the middle of the night for these emergency surgeries. I'm always on call. I'm doing the best that I can to raise my daughters. That's a show in itself. I will probably watch that show. If it's a show about Zoe Saldana saying, hey, I'm a professional woman, I'm trying to raise kids, and I'm also trying to like save the world, I will watch that show. But if this is really about Lioness and covert operations, keep the kids out of it.
Yeah.
Please keep the kids out of it.
Yeah, it almost seems so inconsequential. And I get that. And this is going to sound super cold-hearted. But if you're willing to assault American police officers on American soil for the sake of the greater good, and who really gives a damn about your daughter in a car accident?
Yeah.
And again, super cold-hearted. I get that.
Yeah.
But like in the grand scope of things, as a viewer, as a third party, especially when that daughter is so unlikable.
Yeah.
The cognitive dissonance is very strong with that.
I agree. It would be better if Zoe Saldana is really that character, have her be uncaring all the time. Where Neil calls and says, hey, Kate's been in a car accident. I don't know where you are and need you to come home. And Zoe's like, hey, we've got a rule. When I'm on a project, I'm on the project. You're going to have to handle it yourself. Then that B plot is okay with me because it shows that like she's consistent all the time. But here she's like, okay, guys, if you could just manage this without me for a couple of days. My daughter's been in a car accident. I've got to go home. And
although, man, she was stone cold when she's talking to her daughter in the hospital bed.
yeah,
I thought that was pretty consistent with her, where she was just like, you effed up. You broke the rules. You got to live with the consequences for the rest of your life now.
you and I don't have kids, so
That's
maybe
true.
the parenting aspect is even less relevant for us.
Yeah. But in any case, so Lioness, it's a mooch. For whatever reason that I may not have been so eloquent about, it's strangely compelling. I cannot give it my full-fledged must subscribe. I think this is going to be one of the rare shows that the rating is probably going to change at the end of the season if it really has a kick-ass ending. If it doesn't, worst case scenario, this is still a strong mooch. This is the kind of show where your dad, your uncle, an older generation parent who, you know, where you're into the military aspect of it, I think you're going to absolutely love it.
Taylor Sheridan, his universe is expanding.
Yeah, this is now Paramount Plus's, I think, 5th or 6th Taylor Sheridan show.
That is Streamer Skip. What is the upcoming assignments that we've got?
All right, so for year 2, that's right, for year 2 of Streamer Skip.
Yep. How do we kick it off?
You're going to be on Hulu watching a show called Reasonable Doubt.
Oh.
And I will be on Amazon Prime watching Justified City Primeval. Spoiler alert, I've seen Justified, the original TV series. I think it was on FX. This is not a reboot. This is a legacy sequel, as it were. So that should be interesting.
I'm ready. All right, my friend. Where can all of our listeners give us feedback on season 1 and on these latest 2 episodes?
If you have any thoughts on Lioness, on Muscles and Mayhem, are you a fan of the Gladiators? Are you a fan of the American Military Industrial Complex? Are you a fan of Stream or Skip? We all know you are. Don't deny it.
Yes.
Do you have shows that you'd like us to watch? Reach out to us. You can tweet at us at F&S Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. You can email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. And as always, you can like this video, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Any of those things helps us out greatly.
Ring the bell. That's my favorite. All right, dude. I appreciate your time and your commitment to Lioness this week. Listeners, thank you for your time and attention. We will see you next week. New episode, Films and Stuff. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.